there, I'm Jeanette Lane for Simply Cards and Papercraft, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing some alcohol marker coloring tips so that you can color your British Garden Birds stamp set with alcohol markers in case that's something that you've never tried, or maybe you're a little intimidated by it like I was at the beginning. I'm still kind of a little intimidated, but there's some tips that I wanted to share with you, tips that I've learned that have helped me vastly improve my alcohol marker coloring. So here are the markers that I'm going to be working with. These are Little Tipsy brand, and there's lots of alcohol marker brands on the market. Some of them are a bargain, like the Little Tipsies, and are great for beginners. And then there are more expensive brands for when you are more confident and you are able to make the investment, for a brand like Copic alcohol markers, which are amazing to work with as well. So these Little Tipsies are great because, again, they're a bargain, and I will have a link for you below where you can get your own set, and they're perfect for beginners. So we have a dual tip, so we have a fine tip on that side, and then we have a chisel tip on this side. So I'm going to push these markers lovingly aside, and we're going to move on to inks. So when you are planning to color your stamps with alcohol markers, you're going to need an ink that doesn't react to your alcohol markers. And you can use Memento ink. This is the one that I'm going to be using in Tuxedo Black. And also Nuvo hybrid inks are great for alcohol marker coloring as well. Now, before I move on to talking about the paper that I'm going to be using for my stamping and coloring, and before you swatch, before you move on, before you make yourself a cup of tea, first you want to make sure to protect the surface that you're coloring on, and I learned this the hard way on this white table. Thankfully, I caught it in time, but you want to make sure to cover your table that you're working on, your desk, cover that with a craft mat of some sort. Don't just put a protective piece of cardstock underneath, because the paper that I'm working with is 240 GSM, so that's pretty thick, and it still bleeds through just a hair. So you always want to make sure to protect your surface with a craft mat. Now, the paper pad I'm going to be using is from Spectrum Noir, and this is the premium marker paper pad. It's 240 GSM, so it's good quality, but it's also ultra smooth. And you want to make sure, I guess the best way to pick your paper is to make sure that it's thicker, on the thicker side. Make sure it's smooth, and make sure you swatch your paper to, ensure that there's not too much bleed through, that it doesn't accidentally tear because it's too thin. So I recommend just a white, smooth cardstock, and this one is great because it's specifically made for alcohol marker coloring. Another thing that you want to do before you start coloring is to swatch your markers on a piece of paper that you're going to be using. So I've swatched this beforehand, and this is the inside of my storage box lid, so I kept my chart in there, my swatch chart, just to make sure I wouldn't lose it. Just washi taped it in there. And so I've swatched every color and also written down the corresponding numbers. Now, this is so helpful when you are coloring, as you're going to see, because to color a certain section of your stamp, you're going to need more than just one color to do it. And so it's just really easy to reference this chart, especially when it's going to be on the same paper that you're going to be using. And the reason that you want to use the same paper when you're swatching and when you're stamping is because sometimes the ink absorbs differently onto different papers. So just make sure that you are swatching, that the paper that you swatch your alcohol markers with is the paper that you're going to be continuing to stamp and color with your markers. Now, the first bird that I'm going to be coloring today is this blue finch. So I'm just going to grab my little blue finch and mount him onto my acrylic block. So there he is, and then I'm just going to press down. There's no ink on my stamp yet, so just press down to make sure that my stamp is secure on my block. So here are some bullfinches that I've colored previously. As you can see, they have really beautiful orange feathers right here, and also some grays and some blacks. So we have a few colors that we're going to need to color our bullfinch. So here are all the markers that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to start off with the lightest color, referring to my color swatch, of course, my color swatch chart, and the lightest color that I'm going to be using for my bullfinch is CG1. So I'm just going to color his beak and the top of his head, and also these back feathers here with my CG1. As you'll notice, I'm just doing flicks on my bird, but of course you can do circular strokes as well. It's completely up to you. I end up switching between circular strokes and flicks. Now for my coloring, I'm going to be working from lightest to darkest. Some people work the opposite way, from darkest to lightest colors. It really is up to you. Sometimes I do switch, flip-flop, and start with darkest colors first. But the way that I learned to color with alcohol markers was to start with my lightest color and then move on to my darker colors. So the next darkest shade that I'm going to be using, so I'm just going to concentrate, I'm not going to do his belly yet, I'm just going to concentrate on the top of his head and his back feathers there. So I'm going to grab my CG5, and that's cool gray, and I'm just coloring certain areas with my CG5. Now I'm going to move to my third darkest gray, and that's CG7. With my CG7, I'm going in and I'm just coloring along almost along the outline of the bird. So I'm not going too far in over the CG5, so I'm just doing just the outline here. And when you're coloring with alcohol markers, there's always questions about, how do you color with light source in mind? What about the light source? What do I do? And don't worry. Claire Rollins of Daisy May, who is an expert colorist, she says to not think too much about light source, that as long as you have a combination of lights and darks when you're coloring, that it's gonna look realistic. So I have adopted that motto from Claire, and I don't worry too much about light source, but I do make sure to have a combination of dark colors and light colors. All right, so I have my grays all nice and colored, and then I'm going to move on to my darkest color, which is black, and this is 120, so color 120. So we're just going to color with our black with our number 120 over our previous gray coloring, and that's all right. And then we're just going to put a little bit right here on top of his head, and then we're going to pull that color down in just a bit, as you'll see. So this is what our bullfinch looks like thus far. And now we're going to go back with our CG1, which is our lightest gray that we've been using. And we're going to, now I'm going to move on to not doing flicks. I'm going to do little circular motions and blend all these colors together. So just doing circular motions and blending, blending, blending. Blend right here on top of his little head. And a little bit more on his beak. If this section is done, we can move on to the rest of his body. So I'm going to again start with my lightest color, and that is number 26 in Pastel Peach. And what I'm going to do, he has a little bit of white down here just at the bottom by his legs. And so I'm not going to color with the 26 down there. So I'm just going to leave just like a little white space there. But I am going to pull this color, do little flicks upward towards the rest of towards his head, I guess. I'm going to move on to my darker shade, which is number 25 in Salmon Pink. And I'm just going to concentrate that right here. So notice that this section here kind of looks like a candy corn. So we have our white here, and then we have our number 26, and then we have our number 25. So we're just going to color this right about there And we're going to stop and go back to our number 26. I always open the wrong end. I should really read it. It says right here, broad and fine tip, but I always forget to read it. All right, so now what we're gonna do is pull down some of this 25, which is a darker shade, and we're gonna pull it down towards the 26. So you can see it start to blend there. And now I'm gonna move on to my next darkest color, which is number 22. And I'm just gonna start here with where my 25 ended and just color, do some more little flicks all the way up to right here under his chin. And then I'm gonna move on to right around here. Right around this area here. And then I'm going to go back to my number 25 and I'm going to blend. So I'm going to pull some of this 22 down towards my 25. Kind of blend it slightly by pulling that color down, allowing them to mix a little bit. And then I'm also going to pull that 22 with my 25, so I'm just pulling that color here, just with little tiny flicks. And then I'm going to go back to my lightest color that I was using for this section, which was 26, and I'm just gonna finish this section off here. So blending, and this one I'm doing kind of like circular strokes, blending these colors out. And then right down here, just pulling that color down a little bit more. Now to blend into the white that we didn't color, I'm going to be using a really light, it's almost like a colorless blender, but it's not. And that is number 132 in Milky White. So we're just going to pull that 26, so we're going to pull it down towards the white. So I'm looking at my previous coloring here for reference, and I noticed that I messed up in quite a few areas. I totally forgot that his whole head on the top is black. I guess I was just focusing on his belly, getting his belly right. And also we were missing some gray here just underneath. And we also have some sections of white, which I will show you how to do in just a bit. All right, so we're just going to color his little head black. Sorry about that. I was just so focused on blending. I didn't realize that I was coloring his head wrong. But no, it works out perfectly. And then I was saying that we needed some really light gray up there. So we're just going to put a little bit of light gray. Now we're almost done coloring our bullfinch. I just wanted to add some white details, and there's two ways to go about this. The first way is to just leave out coloring certain sections. So earlier you remember that this section here, we didn't color, we just left it white. So you could do that with different sections of his feathers. But what you can also do is grab a white ink pen. Now this is a Jelly Roll white ink pen, and we're just going to add some of that white detail with a pen. Now, white ink is a great way to add highlights or details to your coloring. And the first time that I saw this was, of course, Claire Rowlands. She is amazing. And she did this. She was adding some detail to her, some highlights to her coloring. And I saw her and I was like, wait, that's legal, Claire? You can do that? And she said, of course you can. It's a great way to just add little details or highlights. And it really does make a difference. So as you can see, I'm just adding some highlights and detail to my bird. So there's my completed bullfinch. Not too shabby, quite proud of him actually. So I'm moving on to coloring the blue tit bird, and I've already stamped him. And the reason that I stamp them a few times is so that I can practice. I feel like before you move on to actually stamping and making a card with your colored stamps, you want to practice a few times. At least that's what I do. So I'll stamp my bird, so this particular bullfinch, a few times until I'm comfortable coloring him and I can go on and make a card. Also, I recommend when you finally have mastered your bird and you love the colors that you've used, you want to make a reference chart. That's what I recommend. And you can store this reference chart with your A4 size stamp set. So you would stamp your birds, and then next to each bird, you would write the colors that you use to color them. So it's just so helpful, because when you go back to replicate a card, let's say you want to make a card in the springtime, and then you go back like during winter time and you want to replicate the card, you don't have to try to figure out, what colors did I use to blend these, to blend his feathers. What was that, 125? Was that 123? So you have all the colors written down next to the bird that you used. So you'll have all those colors written down and stored with your stamp set so that you know exactly what to do when it's time to replicate your coloring. Okay, so let's get started on our little blue tit here. And as you can see, this one is a little bit, at least for me, it was a little bit more difficult to color, but I hope to break down the steps for you. So we're gonna start off with his belly. So I'm gonna be using 2 yellows for that. So I've got 35 and 45, and I've also got 133. So this is what I'm gonna use to color his belly. So I'm gonna start off with the 133, which is my the lightest of the 3 shades that I'm gonna be using. And I'm gonna color the whole section of his underbelly here with the 133. And then I'm gonna move on to my next shade, which is number 45. So this one is lighter than number 35 for some reason. So that's why it's so important to swatch your colors so that you can really see the shades, like which shade is darker and which shade is lighter. So we're gonna start not at the very bottom. So I'm gonna start, I wanna say right about here, kind of in the middle. And we're just going to use little strokes to color just this little underside. All right, and we're gonna stop right about there, and I'm gonna switch over to the darkest yellow, which is 35. And we're gonna start right here, right over our 45. So just a little bit over our 45 color that we've put down previously. And we're gonna go all the way to under his chinny chin chin. And I'm gonna color just under his wing, right about there. So now I'm gonna go back to number 45, and I'm gonna pull some of this 35 down and blend that slightly, blending that with flicking motions. All right, and then I can grab my 133, and we're gonna move down here to where my 45 starts, and we're just going to pull that color down, blending that with little flicks as we go. So now that we have his little yellow belly, we can move on to his head. Now to color his head here, he's got like a little white spot here, and then it blends into a darker blue. So we're gonna start with our lightest shade of blue, which is 144. And I'm gonna color, but I'm not gonna color right where his beak, so I wouldn't color his whole head, because I wanna leave this section white. So what we're gonna do is start right about here, right above his eyebrow. He's got a fine brow. And we're going to just color this whole thing in 144. And we can even go ahead and do that down here, just for reference. Maybe down here. We're gonna go over this with the darkest shade of blue that I have in just a bit. And then what we're gonna do is grab our darkest shade of blue, which is number 70 in royal blue. And we're gonna concentrate that on the back. Color his head back here. And then he has like a little mask, like a little Zorro mask. He's so cute. And then we're just gonna take that blue, because he's really blue, right here under his cheek, and then right under his beak. So that's what his head looks like thus far. So now I'm gonna go back with my 144, and I'm going to pull some of this color, some of this darker color down. So just in little flicks pulling some of that, blending some of that dark blue this way towards the lighter section on his little head right here. So next I'm going to take my 132 and I'm just going to pull that color down towards the white on his head. Kind of blend that out a little bit. So I want to show you a common mistake that I make a lot, but also I've heard other people who have started out with alcohol marker coloring that this happens. So as you can see here, the ink has spread outside of my little stamp, so right off of his head there. And that's all right if you're going to end up fussy cutting your stamp. I wouldn't worry too much about it. However, what happens is when you're coloring with alcohol ink, it tends to spread. So you want to make sure to be patient. Don't be like Jeanette, don't be impatient, and wait for each layer to dry before you move on, just so you can see if, oh no, my ink is starting to spread. With just one layer, I should probably not go straight into adding my second layer because it's just gonna exacerbate the situation. So that's what happened here. So we've got that little fuzz there. Sorry, not the little fuzz. It looks like fuzz, but he just has, the ink has spread outwardly. And to fix that, you can just take some colorless blender and pick some of that ink up. But you also want to be very, very careful, because if you already have too much ink on there and you add a colorless blender there, it's going to spread even further. So just be careful if you're going to use a colorless blender to fix that that mistake there. So now we're going to move on to his back here, and I left that for the end because it's a little tricky, because his feathers, the blue tip feathers, are light yellow, but they also have a tinge of gray, but also some more light blue. So the way we're going to tackle this is to first lay down our lightest blue color. So we're going to go back to the 144, and I'm just going to do flicks and color here and also here, but I'm going to leave just this probably like this oval shape here without any blue color for now, because I want to add some yellow. So we'll just leave kind of like an oval shape, and we'll reserve that for the yellow in his feathers. Now I'm going to take my lightest yellow, which is 45, and I'm going to be brave and just color here with the yellow, kind of blending all that out. We're going to go over this a few times. So now that I've got my yellow there, I'm going to go back with my light blue. I'm going to color right over the yellow. So it's left a light yellow hue to his backside, and we're going to add a little bit more yellow. So I'm just going to go back over with some more yellow right on top of that blue. And then we're also going to use some of this dark blue, so the one that we used on his head, so number 70. And we're just going to use it just a little bit on his tail feathers back here. Just a little bit. We'll blend that out with our 144, which is our lightest blue. Now, if you're new to alcohol marker coloring, you probably noticed by now that there's a lot of going back and forth between colors, and that's completely normal because, you know, you're blending, constantly blending out your colors. So now I'm going to go over with the lightest gray. So this is CG1, and I'm just going to blend that yellow and that blue together. Kind of blend that a little bit out here too. Give him a little bit more of a gray kind of hue, because he does have just a little tinge of gray. Just want to make sure to represent that. And we're done with our blue tit and also our bullfinch. I hope that these tips were helpful and that you've gained some confidence in your ability to color with alcohol markers, or maybe you've never tried it before and this video has piqued your interest. I'm Jeanette Lane for Simply Cards and Papercraft, and don't forget to pick up issue 187 so that you can get this stunning British Gardens birds stamp and die set. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in a video real soon.